Alrighty, hello everybody. Continuing our little discussion of late 19th century America. Now, we've been talking kind of in generalities here about industrialization and conquering the West. Now it's time to get into some specifics. Now, they got us picking up right after Reconstruction. So, after Reconstruction, of course, the presidents were Ulysses S. Grant, back to back terms. You know, he won the Civil War, so easy guy to get elected. Had Rutherford B. Haynes from 1876 1880. He ran on one term, promising to run one term, and he did it one term. So we're going to start off here with James Garfield. In 1880, he gets elected from the great state of Ohio. What's he famous for? Famous for getting shot. Second day of July, 1881. Just the guy who shoots him. Charles Guiteau. And there's his only friend. They actually still have the weapon. Rumor has it he actually used to sleep with this thing. Yeah, he used to sleep with this small revolver-looking thing. He was looking for a reason to use it. To be honest with you, it kind of reminds me of that movie Joker a little bit. Yeah, one of these loners, nothing else to do with his life, and decide to shoot the president. Well, if you're a big fan of Garfield, well, the good news is they hung our friend Charles Guiteau pretty fast. Now, in the 1870s, 1890s, you got the three issues that keep coming up over and over again. You guys already know about this. You know about the Industrial Revolution and the growth of corporations. These companies are getting unbelievably huge. It's something we've never seen before, and the government is coming under pressure from a lot of people, labor unions, and people in general, to do something about these corporations who are starting to develop into monopolies and abusing people. Sooner or later, you got to do something about this. And of course, settling the Trans Mississippi West, trans beyond the Mississippi. That's been part of American history from day one. So they have to settle the West, and there's complete chaos out there with the shootout, the OK Corral, and all this kind of stuff happening. So they need to put a lid on that somehow. And back in the East, we've got explosive urban growth. People leaving the farms, they're going to the cities. New York, Philadelphia, Boston, populations exploded as people cramming into the cities. And as you move west, Indianapolis, Chicago, eventually Kansas City, Denver, LA, all going to have the same problem. So many people coming into the cities. You don't have jobs for everybody. The living conditions are terrible. Got to do something about that because that's why you've elected a government, right? Now, let's take a look at some of the 1880s and 1890s politics here. Now, the strength of the Democratic Party is in the South, and you've got some immigrants in cities in the North and the West who tend to vote Democrat. Republicans are strong everywhere, in the working class and the business class. And there's a very simple reason for this. All right, what happened in 1865? Civil War ended. Who's strong in the South? Democratic Party. There's no way they're going to win an election anytime soon. You were the leading political party in a part of the country trying to break loose. So you're not going to defeat a combination of the North and the West anytime soon. It's going to be a while before people start to kind of forget about that. Now, there's an intense interest in politics back then. Average voter turnout of 80%, even as high as 95% on occasion. Our last presidential election, as crazy as it was in 2016, only about 40% of people turned out to vote. Isn't that amazing? And you think elections are crazy now? Imagine what it must have been like in the 1880s and 1890s. We're going to talk about political machines. Let's talk about it right now since I got it up on the screen. A political machine is a political organization run by a political party, Democratic Party, Republican Party, both do it, where they ensure that the people of an area are going to vote for their candidate. How do they do this? Bribes. Sometimes they promise you a job. Hey, you need a job? I get you one over in the factory. You vote for my candidate, right? Or maybe, hey, I hear you didn't vote for my guy. Maybe you end up losing your job somewhere down the road. It tends to get very dirty. It tends to get very, shall we say, undemocratic at times. But unfortunately, political machines were very much a reality back then. And rumor has it they're still around in some degree. It's just the way it goes in big cities sometimes. If you don't believe me, take a good look at the election history of Chicago when you get a chance. They used to have dead people voting in elections. Yeah, they would go out to the cemetery and vote and write names off of gravestones and turn in votes for those names. Yeah, didn't find out till later. Too late. Don't worry about that. Now, here are the issues that keep popping up in every election. Tariffs. Why are tariffs so important? The tariff, first of all, what's a tariff? A tariff is a tax on imports, stuff coming into the country. If I have something coming into the country from, say, Great Britain, they're making, I don't know, say hats, for instance, and a British hat is $1.50 and an American hat's $2, what are you going to buy? Yeah, you end up going to buy the British hat, right? So if we put a tariff on the British hat of $1, whatever the price is plus $1, now the British hat is $2.50, the American hat's $2. You end up buying the American one. They do this to protect their own industries. Now that helps the northern cities out where the industry is. It doesn't help the south out too much where there isn't quite as much industry. They're used to trading cotton for goods overseas. It's the exact same situation you had before the Civil War. Now, the money supply. We talked about the money supply, how $1 was backed by a dollar worth of gold or silver. There's not that much money floating around, so it's hard to get loans. And whatever loans you give out, very high interest rate. People want to increase the money supply so you can get more loans, so you can get more money. Problem is, you're not backed up by gold or silver, so that could lead to inflation. Anybody remember the Weimar Republic from the 1920s? Trying to avoid that kind of situation. And of course, three is civil service reform. The government is extremely corrupt at the time. Big surprise there. They're handing out jobs to their friends quite openly, and people who do donate stuff. And people are very sick of that and they want that to end as well. And down here, I have note the government does not think it's the government's job to regulate corporations, provide social welfare net. A lot of people are pressuring the government to do things about corporations and provide stuff like unemployment insurance. Now, late 19th century, the government doesn't believe it's their job to do that. Again, they've never had to really deal with corporations this size before. As for social welfare net, that is something that is completely alien in government thought at the time. But as we see, things are going to change because of what they had to deal with, the size of these corporations and the threat sometimes they present to the American economy. So things do change. It takes a while, even the U.S. government, but U.S. government being the government, like I said, point A to point B takes a long time. Hey, John Sherman, remember him, the Sherman Antitrust Act? Exactly. Now the government's getting in the business of busting up monopolies. But he's not done yet. He decides I have to do something about expanding the money supply. So he's the Secretary of the Treasurer in 1890. After he decides to bust up some trusts, he's going to start buying silver. 4.5 million ounces of silver a month. Why is he doing this? Because you increase the money supply. Remember, gold or silver backs a dollar. He decides to go with silver. So now you got the silver, dollar worth of silver, more silver, you can produce more dollars and more money goes to the economy. You actually loan stuff out to people and people actually have access to money. See, U.S. government is beginning to respond to all these problems they had before. It takes a while, but they're finally doing it. The Grand Army of the Republic. This is a lobbyist group, one of the first lobbyist groups we've ever seen. Yeah, we got them today. Grand Army of the Republic's one of the first. It's a fraternal organization and it's made up of Union veterans. Didn't think they'd be Confederate ones, right? As you can tell by this quote in their brochure, the Democratic Party may be described as a common sewer and loathsome receptacle. Yes, I guess they're pretty much on the Republican side. Remember, the Democratic Party, late 19th century, they're linked to the Confederate States of America because, that's where their power base was. And of course, the Democratic Party doesn't really respond to this criticism very much because, let's face it, you did start a civil war, you lost, and you're lucky you're not hanging from the end of a rope. So, they just kind of have to take their lumps and try to work their way back into the election cycle. We were talking about political machines earlier. Here it is. Control the activities of political parties in the city. The guy running it is a ward boss or precinct captain. These guys do whatever needs to be done to get their guy elected. We already talked about it. and it can be extremely corrupt. And one of the worst ones of all time is right there. His name is Boss Tweed. There he is. Real name William Tweed. They call him Boss Tweed. You see a guy who looks kind of like him in that movie, Gangs of New York. It's a little bit early, but close enough. It'll do for movie, right? He handed out 60,000 jobs to his friends. 60,000 jobs, man. I didn't know the city of New York's government was that big back then. That's 4 infantry divisions. Anyway, New York City's debt balloons up to $70 million, maybe $90 million. They're still not sure because he was playing with the books, right? Where do you think that $20 million went? I'll give you a hint. His right pocket. Now, as usual, as you've seen like some of the industrialists, they start getting close to the finish line and they start seeing the light or they're about to get caught. And, he tries to start giving back to the community. $50,000 he gave to orphans and $2.5 million to schools and hospitals. But they're eventually going to catch him. He tries to escape by going to Spain. And believe it or not, somebody in Spain recognized him. And they nabbed him, took him to the embassy, and back to New York he goes. Enjoy Rikers Island. Civil service reform. You don't have to write this thing down. Well, actually, I just want you to write this down. Pendleton Civil Service Act. Now, as I told you before, lots of corruption in American government back then, and people are really getting tired of it. They want a professional, neutral class of civil servants, people who get things done and got there because they actually earned the position, right? Americans are very upset with corruption in the government. They call it the spoil system. Remember that from Andrew Jackson? Garfield was elected on a clean out the sewer campaign. That was his campaign slogan, clean out the sewer. And of course, he ended up getting shot by your friend Charles Guiteau over there. But nonetheless, it led to the Pendleton Civil Service Act. Now, in order to get a government job, you have to pass an exam and written qualifications. Is it perfect? No, it's not, but it's a step in the right direction. See, the government is responding to those 3 concerns we spoke about earlier. Now, after Garfield was shot, we got Chester A. Arthur. He was the vice president, now he's the president. I like to call him Mr. Sideburns. Look at this guy. Might not be sideburns, but they start way up here. It looks kind of like a walrus. I'll wait till you meet Taft. Anyway, point is, he was also Mr. Corruption in New York. But he gets behind the Pendleton Service Act and pushes it with everything he has. So here comes the natural question. Garfield, elected on Clean Out the Sewer, is the president. Why do you take Mr. Corruption as his vice president? Because Chester A. Arthur is in New York. And why is New York important when it comes to elections? A lot of people live there, a lot of votes. So Chester A. Arthur gets, on the ticket so they can win the election. Well, now he becomes president. And here we are, the Pendleton Service Act. He starts pushing it with everything he's got. Why is Mr. Corruption suddenly want to get rid of corruption? Answer is very simple. Think like a politician, then wash your hands. What does every first-term president want? That's right, he wants a second term. So he's going to try and push it with everything he's got. Ain't going to happen. Because here comes Grover Cleveland, who, by the way, is a Democrat. A Democrat finally wins the White House in 1884. How did they end up pulling it off? Well, think about it. 1865, the Civil War is over. It's 1884. It's been close to 20 years since the end of the war. So, people are now starting to move beyond it. Plus, people just want to change after a while. If you take a look at 20th century and 21st century presidential campaigns, with very few exceptions, it's very hard for one party to win 3 elections in a row. Usually 2, and then they end up losing. Very few times does that change. FDR, of course, in the middle of the Second World War. But yeah, people just get tired of it and they want to change. It's been the end. The Civil War's been over 20 years. So time to bring in somebody new. Here comes Grover Cleveland. You know who this guy is, don't you? Yeah, that's John Goodman. I had to get somebody who looked kind of like Grover Cleveland. Not bad for short notice, right? Well, Grover Cleveland has his time in office, 1884. He loses re-election in 1888. So here comes Benjamin Harris, the shortest guy ever to be in the presidency. Well, he gets in the presidency as a Republican, and immediately everyone's screaming he's a big business pawn. They think he's not going to do anything about the about the corporations. They think he's a corrupt individual. So how did he get elected? Who knows? But he got in. And the first thing he did was raise the tariffs to an all-time high. And people are not happy about this, particularly in the North, because, like I said, it hurts Northern industry. And look at this. You want to talk about corruption? Pension numbers rise from 676,000 to 1 million. Yeah, Civil War pensions. Think about it. Yeah, 1865 is when the war ended. This is 1884, 1888, and it goes up 43%. Remember what I said earlier about Confederate pensions eating up Southern budgets? Yeah, it's happening here, and this is the guy who has it happen, a guy in D.C., believe it or not. So yeah, this is the corruption everyone's upset about, and how's that going to work out when he comes up for re-election? It doesn't work very well because Grover Cleveland comes back and wins. Yeah, Grover Cleveland is the 24th and 26th president. Same guy. 25, of course, being Harrison. So the first time um, Cleveland beat Harrison, the second time Harrison beat Cleveland, and now Cleveland comes back and beats Harrison in round 3. Kind of like the 3 Pittsburgh Steelers Dallas Cowboys Super Bowls. That's why I put this picture here. Plus, I can't stand the Dallas Cowboys. Look at that, I was getting his head taken off. You know, that's illegal now. You can't do that. The game was a lot more fun back then. Anyway, the election of 1892, Harrison versus Cleveland. You know who's going to win this thing? Cleveland. We got the Populist Party showing up because, they wanted direct elections. They didn't want the Electoral College anymore. We wanted low tariffs and a lot more silver. So Cleveland says, hey, I'll give you the low tariffs and the silver on keeping the Electoral College. Now, Harrison's the guy in charge when they have the Homestead strike in Pittsburgh. Another one over in Idaho, kind of overreacted, got a lot of people killed because, labor strikes back then get really violent. And Harrison's the guy in charge, and you just open fire on a bunch of people protesting when you shouldn't have done it. So, boom, Cleveland's going to win this thing. Harrison was corrupt. People were upset with him already, and you handled the Homestead and Idaho strikes very badly. So, Grover Cleveland wins. Progressives got 8% of the vote. Might have influenced a few things. Now, our friend Grover Cleveland's back in office, everybody's happy, and then the economy completely takes a plunge. The Great Depression was in 1873. 1893, we got the panic of 1893 because they wanted to find a different term for it, and it got so bad they just threw it out the window and called it the Great Depression. Yeah, there's another one coming up later, but the Great Depression in the 19th century is 1893. And how did it all start? Believe it or not, it began when British investors sold their stocks in railroad and wanted their money in gold. In other words, I want my money back, and I just don't want the money. I want it in gold. Remember, dollar worth of a dollar backed by a dollar worth of gold. Well, the British have a lot of investments over here, and the railroads are big, so there's a lot of gold suddenly leaving the country, which means everyone else starts panicking and everybody starts sending gold out. Everybody wants their money back, everyone's gold, and the gold reserve is dropping. And when I say gold reserve is dropping, that means the U.S. government's about to run out of money. So tariffs had already been dropped, so there's no money coming into the country. The Silver Act, they decided to repeal it, and guess what? They're losing money left and right. Your friend Harrison did this. So the U.S. gold reserve of $100 million down to $91 million. Look at that, it dropped 59%. So corruption again. Wall Street managers do loan the U.S. government $62 million. Do you think they did this for free? Do you think they did this out of the goodness of their heart? No, they're doing this because they want something. $62 million or something. So here we go with the corruption again. Of course, the minute they give them the money, here comes the Wilson-Gorman tariff, and the tariffs skyrocket again. But only for some industries, but not some other ones. Which industries do you think got low tariffs? I'll give you a hint. The ones who loan the money. Yep, the corruption's back again, and you're in the middle of the Great Depression. Now, the Democratic Party is going to split. Why? Because we have 20 to 25% unemployment. And now no one can find work. People are starving. And here we got Coxey's Army. A whole group of people, unemployed, over 100,000 people, gather together in Ohio and begin marching under John Coxey towards D.C. Now, if you're in the government, aren't you a little bit worried? There's 100,000 unemployed people walking straight towards the Capitol building. Yeah, you need to be a little bit worried about that. Don't worry about this stuff here. The unemployment is your fault mentality is beginning to disappear. Remember what we said? There's no such thing as a social safety net? Because of Coxey's army, they decide maybe it's time to start exploring unemployment insurance for people who get fired, for something beyond their control. So now the government is beginning to take this rather seriously. They're starting to work on limiting the corporations. They're starting to work on social safety nets. They're starting to work on expanding the money supply somewhat. The Populist Party disappears and runs over the Democratic Party. So as you can see, the government's view of its own responsibilities is beginning to change. It's starting to look kind of what we see today. Here's William McKinley. He's the guy who shows up after Grover Cleveland. He's a Republican, and he's a big fan of American imperialism. The problem is we've really got nowhere else left to go. We've colonized the West, and we're at the Pacific Ocean, and we see nothing but water. And you want to keep going west, but you can't really walk on water. Only two people have ever walked on water. One's Jesus. Who's the other guy? Now, if you said Elvis, I'll give you partial credit for that. So William McKinley is very much pro-business. He's very much a believer in the American way, and he thinks the United States should get involved in the world and decide to pursue imperialism on his own. Now, these are the driving forces behind American imperialism. In the late 19th century, all of these nations, France, Britain, Russia, Germany, even Italy, have a desire to increase their military strength. For some reason, it's kind of like a machismo type thing. I want a big army. Oops, your army is bigger than mine, and I got to increase my army. Starts with France and Germany, and then the British get involved with the Navy, and even we're going to get mixed up in this stuff. But the real driving force are markets, because we are producing so much stuff. Remember how I said you overwhelm the market in New York, you move over to Jersey, from Jersey you go to Philly, from Philly to Pittsburgh? Same thing's happening. We've saturated American markets. We're producing so much stuff. We have to sell it somewhere. And we're running out of markets in America, so I'll start selling to foreign markets. Now, we don't control that market. Maybe they buy the stuff, maybe they don't. But what if we control the market? What if we take that country over? Suddenly there's a market we can control. We start selling stuff to them because we own it. Yep, that's what number 2 is all about. And number 3, still got the old missionary impulse and the manifest destiny thing still going. Some people want to spread Christianity to other places in Africa or the Philippines or Asia. So that's still there. Other people think America's way of life is worthy of emulating. Everybody should do it. Some things are good, some things are bad. And these are the 3 driving forces behind American imperialism. And we will take a closer look at that next time. Have a great day, and I will talk to you later.